Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for calling.
Hello, good afternoon, Dwayne. How are you today?
Blessed and thankful, sir. How about yourself?
Good, thank you. And thanks to the governor, as the previous caller has also said, thanks to him for making himself available to discuss some issues. I don't have a coronavirus issue to discuss, but it's another issue of importance. Is it possible that I can put it to the governor in about two to 3 minutes?
Your Excellency?
I mean, we're sort of talking about vaccines, so I'm keen to encourage questions about vaccines. But if it's about something else, of course we'll take it. But we don't want to sort of deflect from a discussion about vaccines. But go ahead if you wish to.
Well, yeah, my call is timed. It will take about 2.5 to 3 minutes, and it's a very important issue. Anyway, I'm trying to suggest to you, Governor, that you need to look into the need to reform complaint procedures against judges, because that has become really a big issue in Cayman. It is affecting a lot of people. I have sued a judge, Mr. Ian Kawali, for denial of a fair trial, and I have done that. I've been forced to do that because the complaint procedures don't work very well. And very quickly, the reason why, of course, I ended up taking that unusual action of suing both the government and Justice Ian Kawali is because I went to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. They said they have no jurisdiction. I went to the Chief Justice. He said, well, you have to appeal. I said, well, but I can't appeal because my record has been falsified. And then I appealed anyway, and because my record was falsified, I lost the appeal. And then, of course, I came to you, and you said you couldn't be involved because this was a matter which does not really necessarily involve removal of a judge. So as a result, I ended up with the AG and I sued. And of course, now having gone to court now, the problem that I have is that the first time I went to court, the judge refused to give an order to the AG to respond to my writ. And then when they went to the second, when I sued the judge for 2 months now, he has not responded. And so it is really putting me in a position where it's like they are gaming with me. What I'm suggesting specifically, Governor, is this. I think that if judges can only be investigated only if there is evidence that they will be removed, that makes it very impossible for you to be able, for anybody to actually hold them to account. What they do in other countries is that whether or not there is a possibility of removal, they sift the matter. Like in Ontario, for example, they sift the matter. They say, is it frivolous? Is it vexatious? If it is, then they refuse it and they give it back and they explain. But if there is a prima facie case, even if it might not call for removal, they look at it, and in fact it goes public, and we get to know what the complaint was about, against whom it was, and what the decision was. In the Cayman Islands, there's actually no accountability whatsoever. And I believe personally, and that's just closing now.
Okay, all right. Look, listener, thank you for that. I don't think we should be getting into this on air, and we've had extensive correspondence, so you know my position, and I have the utmost respect for our judiciary and the job they do for our countries. But I don't think it's appropriate to continue this discussion on air, particularly as you're still pursuing action through the court. So I'm sorry, but I think we're going to have to leave it there.
All right. Thanks very much. And I guess this is where your heart sometimes get wider and wider, and all the things on your table issues equally. Let's go to our phones. Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for calling.
Dwayne, it's me again, Bill Sinamba. I'm sorry that I have to call back. I know a lot of people want to call in and so on, but I really was a little bit disappointed that I was cut off by the governor, because I felt, frankly, I was expressing a view, and I was making some specific proposals which might affect people as well.
Right. But as you speak to it, sorry if I may just ask, and I hear your perspective and recalling what I believe His Excellency was sharing. Is it then that potentially, because something's before the courts, that maybe we might be more cautious to, be mindful of our discussion, so not to have it something sub judice, as it were?
Exactly. Well, and you are so right about that. That is why I only mentioned that I had sued the judge. I didn't go into the details.
Right, okay.
That's why I quickly went into the proposals for reform. You see, proposals for reform we can discuss, because you see, there are always cases going on.
Right.
And
Right.
there are always things that are happening. And you can't say that until the case is finished, you can't discuss things for reform.
Right.
You just have to ensure that you are not in any way trying to litigate the matter in public. And
Right.
with me, actually, I had already moved at that point to talking about what happens in other countries and how it is necessary to
Right.
have accountability.
If I could then, and I certainly want you to speak to what you want to, but at some point, if I could ask you, is it then that we are at a place in society, democracies in particular, but in Cayman specifically, since this is where we live and where we're most affected by whatever happens here, is it that there are certain things that we see or seem to think, at least, maybe untouchable? So we don't speak about the judiciary and reform. We don't speak about political reform, whether constitutional or campaign finance reform, immigration reform, maybe some offices. We don't talk about education in some avenues. Or is that potential where we may be in democracies, and well, in Cayman in particular?
Well, in Cayman, Dwayne, the way I feel is that we have overdone this issue about something that is sub judice and so on. Okay, we have overdone it. What the Constitution says is that you should not talk about things which are in court in such a way as to undermine the independence of the judiciary. Okay, if I got up here and I started really going against the judge, getting into a lot of detail and so on and so forth, that would be wrong. But if I say the person is sued for this reason, the writ is on the website, but I think this is an area where reform might be considered, and then I go to discuss generally what reform should be. That should be a healthy discussion, especially that, Woody, since my case went public, I have received communications from people who also have gone through the same problem.
Right. So let me then ask as an example then, and maybe draw reference to what we may see in the media in other jurisdictions. So let's say, for example, there's an ongoing case before the court. It could be a capital offense of some sort for that jurisdiction. It could be a serious offense and the discussion, let's say it's a talk show for argument's sake, or a roundtable discussion, or whether they're university professors or former judges or lawyers, and they're saying, well, the defendant today in court, and this is what happened, and then they start to give opinion and some of the things. Is there a risk in having that discussion that it could evolve into a matter that would potentially undermine the judiciary?
It's a very good example that you've given. First of all, the approach of the courts, generally speaking, is that they are more strict regarding criminal matters, because you want to be more careful regarding criminal matters, because the liberty of the subject is at hand. You don't want to analyze the evidence to suggest that he is guilty or he is not guilty.
Right.
But you can go out there and say, according to what was presented in court today, this is what this witness said, and so on and so forth. We'll see what the other witness will say, and then this is what the lawyer said, like something descriptive as to what is going on.
Right. Okay.
Because if you can't do that, then even people won't get information as to what is going on. What you can't do is to start now expressing opinions regarding what the judge did, and so on and so forth, before the matter is over. So, in other words, you are right that there is need to be cautious, not to get into the detail. But if you want to discuss, for example, issues relating to reform, those are things which, having worked in legislation for a long time, sometimes the case is going on in court, and the problem is being viewed that it might cause a problem.
Okay.
They might not go public, but they start talking about it and so on.
All right. So before I then ask you about those sort of proposals of reform and the like, if I can maybe ask one other thing and maybe something else after that. The judges who sit, sometimes we hear things, and I think we even said earlier that, we don't want to do this, that it could influence the judge or it could somehow. But isn't it the expectation of societies then that the judge, the sitting judge, is of such intellect and integrity and character that, that judge could be watching the evening news, listening to the talk show, to whatever, and not let public opinion or a particular persuasive politician even or some other public pundit say something that would influence the outcome? I mean, are we putting too much credence into the human sort of side of this individual and failing to recognize that, well, they're human? Or are we still elevated in believing that, well, it's a judge, I mean, they're above that sort of thing?
You know, when you are raising the precise issues which have been raised in a lot of countries. If you are a judge and you swore that oath to say that I will faithfully execute my office as a judge without ill will to anybody and so on, if you are going to be influenced by any little opinion that you hear, then maybe you are not fit for office. In fact, as you know very well, courts normally are more worried about what a jury might hear. Like, for example, if you know this, like in the States, for example, they will say, okay, this person shouldn't be tried in this particular county because it's a small place. People think he's guilty. Move him to another country because you tainted the jury pool. Okay? They are more concerned about the jury because these are ordinary human beings. But as a judge, if you are going to be influenced by any little opinion that you hear, then maybe you might be in the wrong job. But you see, there's this fine line that you have to draw between describing what is going on in a court and reporting it, because that is a constitutionally guaranteed right under the Constitution. There's freedom of expression, freedom to exchange ideas, freedom to be informed about things, and so on. And that includes freedom. I mean, why are court hearings generally in what is called a public court, an open court? Why is that? They are in open court because it's a constitutional right of the person who is being tried to have it done in an open court, because very often justice is done in the open, not in secret. And then the people who come in, when you go in, they won't ask you, oh, but are you a relative of the person being tried? No, they can't ask you that, because you have got a right as well, a constitutional right, to go there and know what's going on. And to me, what we need to do is, yes, we need to respect the independence of the judiciary. We need to ensure that we are not discussing things that will interfere with the authority of the court or to undermine the case or prejudice anybody. But if something arises at any point in time and you feel that there should be reform, then you should do that. And, you know, to be frank with you, I wouldn't have even been pursuing this if it hadn't been for some of the people who have got in touch with me. They've had these problems. If you read the report, you know, Dwayne, there's a report of the Judicial and Legal Services Commission 2012 to 2015. There were 9 complaints during that 3-year period against judges. Okay, it is on the website, 9 complaints. But we don't know who complained, for what purpose, how it ended. In some countries, what they would do, at least, in some countries they don't make it public, in some they do. When they don't make it public, they at least say there was a complaint about X of the judge of this particular court, this was the nature of the complaint, and this is the way it was resolved. And the problem that we have in the Cayman Islands is that, you see, they took away the power from the Judicial and Legal Services Commission to be the one listening to complaints. They had that report 2012 to 2015 because under the initial Constitution 2009, it was the Judicial and Legal Services Commission which was supposed to hear complaints against judges. But by an amendment to the Constitution, it was given to the Chief Justice. And I've never found that structure anywhere else. The structure is always that there should be an independent body, structurally independent, so that when they look at it and they find that maybe there's need for a solution, they say, okay, for this one, the solution is just to tell the Chief Justice that maybe he needs to take some corrective measures. In other cases, you know, if it's a criminal offense, sometimes they even recommend that, well, it should be reported to the DPP and so on. And I just think that in Cayman, we need to work on that. People are suffering. They don't know where to go.
Okay.
We need to be able to look at that and discuss it.
Right.
And I think the way to do it is not to say that you are not going to discuss it at all.
Right. Now, before we go to the break, let me ask you the question. The reforms, either through laws or the like, or even sometimes the policies, isn't that for elected members of the legislatures to do? I mean, is this a case where, you know, when we look at laws and policies, that there isn't the political will, the elected members in our House of Parliament isn't being called to task to address these issues?
And you're right about that. That's why I think one of the lawyer who usually appears on the other show, he called, and he did mention it to, I think it was the leader of the opposition. He also was mentioning something that happened to him with a client. Actually, to be frank, it was an accusation of racism between lawyers and judges and so on. So he was telling I think it was the leader of the opposition to say, as legislators, you have to be able to look at this and find a way in which you can make sure that people are treated fairly. By the way, a very important area in this, I've always advocated that appointment of judges in the Cayman Islands should be subject to the approval of the Legislative Assembly. You have judges at the moment who have contracts which are 8 years long. They give them contracts that long, 8 years. And what if that judge in the middle there's a little bit of a problem? You can't even sometimes decide to wait him out until the end of the contract to avoid a whole kerfuffle. It becomes very, very difficult. But you're right. The answer very often is legislation, and part of that is for somebody like me calling, sensitizing people, letting them know that I'm not the only person who's going through this, and to be able to carry some action. Actually, I intend to get in touch with some members in the opposition to be able to give them this some proposals which they can work on, so that people can get some relief.
All right. Well, blessings to you, man, and thanks. Maybe through education discussion, maybe we'll be able to get to a point where it's not just information, but it's actually, positive action. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate it, Gwen.
Your pleasure, man. All right, let's pause and take a short break.